His Excellency Gattinara is the result of almost 2 years of dialogue with different subjects, each in their own way passionately provided a wealth of details in unveiling the characteristics of this great wine. It was that landscape which first spoke to me about Gattinara. On one beautiful winter day, I found myself in front of the Torre delle Castelle in the microscopic testing vineyard for clones of Nebbiolo, or better yet, Spanna. With southeast exposure, this teeny parcel of land is bathed in sun all day long, and it would be difficult to see the backlit figure of the Gattinara Cathedral drenched in the morning light if the view is not properly framed between the tree branches. The 1,000-year-old tower at the exact center, the mighty needle forgotten by the hand of a tailor, seems to be the final stitch of a seam that joins two hills covered with vineyards. Going towards the square on the terrace near the Madonna della Neve chapel, the natural panorama overlooking the Biella plain is quite simply superb, majestic, and magnificent. It's a series of organized rows with varying layouts, a multicolored covering sitting at the foot of the mighty snow-covered Monte Rosa mountain chain. That oasis of silence, peace, and serenity reminded me of the poetic description of the Gattinara artist and writer Ghibellino. Our hill is like a wall that separates the Valsesian Alps from the Vercelli plain. It's the door and key to two worlds. The village, protected from cold northern winds coming down from Monte Rosa, is nestled at the base of the hill like a baby tugging on his mother's skirt, wanting to be fed. And our hill has always been a generous mother who has never betrayed us. Its milk is red like blood and smells like violets. Its taste is a strong, sourish and cutting, suitable only for true and mature men, best hour of vitality and virility. The milk from our hill is called wine, but sometimes, if you leave it to the time to care for it, it reaches the highest peaks, becoming a beverage worthy of pleasuring the most refined palates. Wine growing in the territory of Gattinara has an ancient history. The bulk of the historical document consulted told me how more than 2,000 years of history and work has transformed it into a field rich in variations and distinctiveness. The Ligurians were the first to use the workable land in order to sustain themselves, but it was only after the Celts were driven out by the Romans that this area became familiar with wine growing, where it remained a pillar of the local economy until the beginning of the 20th century. There is a lot of people whose histories deeply affected the history of wine. It would be a vain undertaking to report them all or to describe in detail the mutual influences. However, a couple relating to Cardinal Mercurino and Carlo Caligaris deserve to be mentioned. The Grand Chancellor of Carlo V has always been Gattinara's most representative historical figure. He is credited with introducing the name of Gattinara and its Nebbiolo to the European courts of the 16th century, at least 3 centuries before the Nebbiolo from Barolo was presented to the court of Savoia by Marquise Giulia Falletti. The distinguished cardinal and diplomat was an enthusiastic apologist for Gattinara wine. He introduced it not only on the table of the widow of Duke Emanuele Filiberto, but he used it extensively as gifts for international friends and the most important personalities of various states with whom he had to negotiate with. And such was his passion for wine that he even had plantations of Muscat, Bernache, Malvasia, and other qualities of grapes within the fenced park of his Gattinara castle. His fellow citizen Caligaris, even though his nobility was below that of the cardinal, was a true leader of the 19th century. His memoirs, written over the course of his long life, are an invaluable source in helping us comprehend what took place in one of the most fundamental centuries in the history of wine, not just in Gattinara. His descriptions on the effects of the hail are unforgettable. For Gattinara, the year 1853 was the most disastrous, the most wretched, and most miserable among those ever experienced during a man's life. It seemed that all the elements that go against the prosperity and welfare of the countryside conspirated to our damage. On August 31st, in the evening at dusk, the sky was again covered with clouds that almost certainly would drop a great deal of water, when all of a sudden a horrible storm took place at about 1 o'clock in the night. Between non-stop flashing and the dull rumble of thunder, the storm poured an inordinate amount of rain onto the land that was mixed with a great deal of hail, especially in the hills, and the grapevines were so lashed and stripped of their foliage that not even a shadow of vegetation appeared to remain if seen from afar. Those few clusters were crushed and carried by the wind, which were never seen again. A few clusters still remained in the regions of Marchizzola, Castelle, Guardia, Marzola, Casalecchio, Sottomonte, and in the plantations toward Zesesia. But the scarcity of the harvest was unheard of. In our vineyards at Molsino, Lurga, Villetto, Bozzanette, Permalone, and Rosso, in a total of about 3 days, there were not enough grapes to make a glass of wine, and most of the grape wines in the territory experienced the same condition. The grape harvest could be considered a perfect nothing. Most of the owners did not even obtain a glass. Some made a small amount of it, but it was so limited that if it had been divided into equal parts among the entire population of the village, one could drink it in 1 day without getting drunk. If the territory represents the history of a place, there is a cultural message in the Gattinara winemaking landscape of the 20th century, where the living dialogue with the producers even better describes the changes that occurred also among those who were not mentioned in official sources. Up until the 60s, working full-time in agriculture meant working from sunrise until sunset, and not just in the vineyard, with cows, fields, vegetable gardens, and a few fruit trees. The day started very early, almost in the black of night, and ended at sunset. Towards the end of the 60s, some businessmen and local producers began buying land in the hills, and companies like Travaglini, Nervi and Antoniolo quickly added about 40–45% of the entire hillside surface to the vineyard registers. Unlike what happened in many, maybe too many Italian wine areas, where flattered winemakers, following the practice of the day, eliminated a centuries-old winemaking asset in order to plant international varieties and then bitterly regretted it, in Gattinara the various producers hang on tight to Nebbiolo. It is a Nebbiolo completely transformed by its relationship with the territory. It can be recognized by the characteristics that it gets from nowhere else, not even in nearby Gemme, home to a great Nebbiolo from Alto Piemonte, because the grapes from Gattinara mature on a more difficult terrain from an agronomic point of view, with a rocky backbone made up of porphyry and granite. The hill in Gemme is more silty and clayey and doesn't really suffer moisture problems, and thus feels less water stress during the summer months, unlike in Gattinara, where the lack of water is severely felt in a particularly dry year. These different properties confirmed by the terroir are emphasized by the vinification processes and offer the national and international markets a territorial wine. This is a territory that gives back 100 times more than what you put into it. Nothing is forced in the cellar, with clean barrels, temperature-controlled fermentation, long, if not extremely long, aging able to tame that edgy nature of freshly wrecked Gattinara. In this way, Gattinara wines endure the test of time. Getting to this point, after having listened to the stories from the countryside, as well as from written and oral sources, the only thing left to do is to listen closely to the voice of the most important protagonist of this book. Soldati said, Gattinara seems to draw its secret strength from the wind which passes over the glaciers of Rosa a few minutes before blowing through the vineyards. In fact, knowing how to listen to it with your heart, that precious ruby-colored liquid also contains tangible elements and materials that can be seen and heard. All those factors that cannot be seen are perceived, they cannot be heard or touched, but they are the markers of this wine, the top layer of soil with the nutrients and the water, the invisibility of the sun's rays, the yeasts of the grape skins, the undiscerning moisture. The story that it tells is distinct, clear, without compromise. You can hear the territory, which precisely puts its stamp on the vintage. You can recognize the nobility of the wine and that rusty minerality given by the soil, which becomes notes of raspberry and violets to the nose. The body is never too full. Soldati said, it would be a port, a lean, dry, liquid port, almost ethereal. The story is now complete. The greatness of this wine has now been uncovered. Now we can drink a sip of Gattinara, as long as it's real, of course, without asking for anything else.